And so as if you haven't been on, I know I don't know if I recognize anyone's names here. Oh, Bria was on last week, and I know Kelsey's been on here as well. But if you my hope is that you've at least looked at some of my materials on Blackboard. I'm not Blackboard, YouTube, and you've seen the previous 2 review sessions that I've done. Today I wanted to go over the last thing that you will need to prepare for the for your test next week. And I know it's next Saturday. But the last thing I wanted to go over was the Reconstitution. And then I can highlight any of the things that you might need and have questions on. My intention is not to have a review session next week, because I actually thought your test was going to be like Monday or Tuesday next week. So I didn't think we were going to be doing it. I actually have another appointment, so I don't know that I can meet next Tuesday. If I need to, it would probably just be like later in the afternoon, like 2:30, 3 o'clock. But we'll play it by ear and see if you do want an extra session. Just send me an email or ask Miss Petro to Professor Petro to send me an email, and I will hold the session. It would just most likely be in the afternoon, and I will reply to you. I'll also let Kelsey know, who's in your class, just in case you guys have like a a nurse text chain going on, so you can kind of keep up with each other. So over the last 2 weeks, this is week 3. We missed the first week because I had a situation where I couldn't be here. So thank you for being patient with that with me. But I've covered pretty much examples of everything that you would see on your test. The biggest thing is just practicing more of those examples. So I put together this. It's in the OneDrive folder under Boyce 110. It's 23 fall Boyce 110 review. I'm writing on it. I'm changing numbers and things like that. But the whole purpose of that is just to give you examples of the types of questions. So like what you're seeing right here, this Reconstitution question, you're going to see 2 of these questions. It's just going to be a different label. So this one's Kefsol. It might be another medication type. You can just do a Google search for the different types of Reconstitution type medications. You can look at some of the sample reconstitutions, like images that I have on the OneDrive folder. You might just have to navigate to it. But I'm going to show you how to kind of dissect this question and how to answer it, because in my opinion, you know how to answer this question. You've answered this question before. You answered it many times. This is simply a injectable medication. So you've done a couple of those already in the previous question types. And I even told you that the only difference between like a suspension and an injection is the mode of entry, but you're still calculating for the same thing, which is milliliters. So in this question, it tells us how much medication will the patient receive in 1 dose. You're going to use the label, and you can see the order as listed here. The Kefsol 800 milligrams IM, which is intramuscular, every 6 hours. Now, remember, I know that some of you, all of you, this is your first time taking one of these tests. They're not going to tell you what to look for. You have to know what you're looking for. And I will say this: if you anytime you see IM, so if you see IM, if you see SC, if you see, you won't see it this semester, IV, if you see that it's a suspension type medication, that tells you you're looking for milliliters. Okay. So if it doesn't ask you specifically intramuscular, subcutaneous, intravenous, And then if it's an oral suspension, you're always looking for milliliters in those things. If they want you to find something else like teaspoons or tablespoons, they're going to tell you to calculate teaspoons or calculate tablespoons. So I'm letting you know that just so that way you're not thinking, well, what if they, give me this and then they end up wanting it in teaspoons or tablespoons? They'd have to ask, because the default is put it into the metric system. Milliliters is what you're looking for. All right. So in a typical situation, in a typical label, and I'm going to scroll up here in just a second. When we deal with like a subcutaneous, intramuscular, or even a suspension type question, we're going to see things like here's an oral suspension. Now, I made the mistake of giving this as an example for the subcutaneous intramuscular route, but we would still do the medication. We would still do the calculation the same. And I'll give you another example before we leave here today. But one of the things you would see on your oral suspension is something like 250 milligrams per 5 ml. So it tells you the milligrams, but it also equates it to the volume, okay, because this is liquid. Now, when at first glance, and one of the ways you're dealing with a reconstitution question is that it'll tell you the strength, but it tells you 1 gram. It doesn't tell you anything about the volume. Okay, so that's not 1 gram per milliliter. That's not 1 gram per 5 milliliters. We don't know that based off of looking at the label as it is written. So that is your clue that you need to look at the directions listed on the side. Okay, so this is a nuance, because most of the other questions, actually, the other 23 questions you're going to see, there's not going to be any ambiguity. You're not going to be guessing where that is. But after today and after in the next, 5-10 minutes, you're going to know exactly where to look as well. And then I'm going to challenge you to go in, search for these types of labels and see if you can find the information that I'm going to try and illustrate to you. So we have to read the label as if we are in the pharmacy filling and making this prescription for somebody. That's the thing where it gets a little bit frustrating, because as a nurse, you're probably not doing this. This is usually done in the pharmacy because they would have the sterile water. You probably don't have access to sterile water. However, you might be the one making and mixing in certain scenarios, certain offices. And so I don't want to make the assumption, or we can't make the assumption, that it's always going to be the pharmacist doing these things. So when we look at the label, it says for intramuscular use, that's what we're doing, right? Add 2.5 milliliters or 2.5 milliliters sterile water for injection. Great. Now we have a volume. Good. Then it says to shake well. Now, what's important is, and you might be tempted to be like, okay, so this is 1 gram per 2.5 milliliters. And it's not entirely true. The reason being is the powder that makes up the 1 gram is also going to contribute to the volume after the water is added. So we actually don't know the total volume until we actually read a little bit further. Provides an approximate volume of 3 milliliters. So if we were going to use a number with the 1 gram, it would be the 3 milliliters. However, they made it even easier for you. In parentheses, it tells you very directly how many milligrams per milliliter this is. The 330 milligrams per milliliter is what you're going to utilize for calculating your dose. Okay. We don't need to worry about for IV use, because that's not what we're talking about. The only other thing that we might want to pay attention to is where it says usual adult dose. You want to make sure that, the order is in the typical range. You can see it says 250 milligrams to 1 gram every 6 to 8 hours. So it says 800 milligrams every 6 hours. So we're good. We're safe. That's good. All right. Now we're just going to solve this the same way you would solve any of the other medications that you've been studying. So I always start with my order. I'm going to do order of available for this particular question. So I start with my order, 800 milligrams. My available is the 330 milligrams. And then that's per 1 ml. Then I'm going to plug into my calculator. And this is also going to be a good opportunity for us to practice the study or how to do rounding, because we're going to do rounding in this most likely. So I'm going to take 800 divided by 330. And I'm going to get an answer of 2.4242424242. So it just keeps on repeating. So I'm just going to write that out, 2.4242, and I'm just going to draw a line over to indicate that it's repeating. We're going to round this answer to the nearest 10th. In order to do that, we look at the 100th place, and then we see how it affects the 10th place. If it's 5 or greater, then we would round up. And if it's 4 or fewer, we would leave it alone. So here we're going to leave it alone at 2.4 milliliters. Sometimes it'll ask you to mark a syringe. So if you have a paper test, you would mark a syringe, and you would just find 2.4 on the syringe, mark it, and then you'd be done answering this question. Are there any questions on how to solve a reconstitution type question?
No.
Yeah, I know, Bria, you waited a whole week for me to say what looks like pretty simple, but I will say, I remember it was several years ago. I came down to, I always say come down. I don't even know if I came down or came over to Boyce or South. I don't know. I don't remember which campus I went to, but I was asked to come in and talk to the nursing students, and they started telling me about this, and I had no idea what they're talking about because they didn't have any examples. Once I did learn, the secret was everyone's looking at that 1 gram and they're trying to just figure it out. But the label, I will say, I'm certain it's a law that they have to tell you what the how it needs to be administered. So it's always going to be on there. You would think it would be more specific and be like, okay, it's on the 1 gram, so we know that it's here and we should be seeing that. But that's how you know you're dealing with a reconstitution, is that you have to look into the label and find that it's actually 330 milligrams per milliliter. So
I do have a quick question.
Please,
Will
go
there
ahead.
ever be a time where like it'll have a different type of measurement for different sites? So like for IV, would it ever be like a different equation or something like that? Or they're pretty much the same for every type of route that you take?
Yeah, so so the like you can do ordered over half for pretty much all of these things. The only time that you can't, if that's like what you're asking, I think that's what you're asking me. The only time you really can't do ordered over available is when you start doing flow rates, and you're not even doing that this semester. So you don't have any flow rate questions.
No, I'm
But
sorry, that wasn't what I was saying. So
oh,
like for
sorry, go ahead.
example, it says for IM, like it'll tell you like 330 milligrams per milliliter.
Mm-hmm.
Will it ever be a time like for IV with the same drug, it's like the thing is different, like 400 per 1 milliliter if you do IV, or like
Okay.
that kind of, or is
Possibly.
that pretty much okay?
So
That's, I'm
there's
like wondering if we have to look out for that if we're looking at the reconstitution, if there's different measurements per like how you know, the route you take.
so let
If
me
that makes sense.
now it does, yeah. So let me pull up the sample labels I have, and then I can show you more specifically what these look like. All right. So this is ampicillin, 1 gram. And what we're going to look at is just to see what it says in what's available. So for this one, it says add 3.5 milliliters. And then resulting solution contains 250 milligrams ampicillin per milliliter. I don't know if this will let me draw on here. No. So this is always going to be intramuscular for this particular example. So to answer your question for this one, it doesn't look like, if it tells you to read the appropriate insert and there's no other information, then you'd have to use, what is available there. You can't just guess off of the insert. So my guess is that they would give you that information if it was different. Let's just look at a different thing. All right, so this is tazidine. Tells you it's 500 milligrams. All right, so let's see here. For IM, you're adding 1.5 milliliters, and then it gives you a approximate volume of 280 milligrams per milliliter. And then I'm looking to see if there's for IV. Oh, here we go. So dilute with at least 5 mil, and then see literature. So you still need what you need to see literature because you can't guess what the total volume is. All you know is 5 milliliters, but you don't know how much that 500 milligrams is going to affect. So like here, when they added 1.8 mil, it probably made a total of 2 milliliters. You don't really know because it doesn't say. All I'm getting at is just whatever it says on the label, that's what you're going to follow. And most likely the questions are going to be pertaining to IM versus IV is my guess. Let's see another example. Here's Tikar or Tikar, not Tiger. So you can see for IV use, it does say to add 4 milliliters, but then it doesn't give us the concentration. Now this one for IM says 2 milliliters. Each 2.5 milliliters of solution will then contain 1 gram of the medication. So they're going to be worded sometimes a little bit differently. That's why I kind of grabbed some of these images just to kind of show you some examples. But mainly for Bria, what I'm looking for is if there's a time where it gives you an IM scenario and then gives you an IV scenario that's different. So that's what I'm looking for. So here it tells you IM, each milliliter contains 350 milligrams. For IV, 1 milliliter solution contains approximately 100 milligrams. So there would be an example. So if we were using this Rocephin, you're going to want to follow the directions based off of IM versus IV. Although I'm going to tell you, you asked that question. I have not yet to this day, since I've been, working as a nursing drug nursing drug calc tutor. And that's been since, like 2010, 11, 12. I've been doing this for a little while. I've not seen it get tricky like that. Probably you would see it get tricky like that on the ATI, but I don't think you're going to see it like that on your actual test. I don't write your test, so I don't know specifically what's on your test. But if I had to guess, you're probably not going to have to decipher it. But now you know at least you can find that information if you needed to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, I know that was a really long way to answer your question. So, okay. So just so you know, this what I'm showing you now, there is a folder. When you go to the OneDrive folder, it is called Reconstitution RX labels. So you can always just pull that up. It's in the as soon as you click on the link for the label or for the practice questions and things like that, it shows up in that right there in that area, so you can pull it out. So then you can decide, do I want to look at Allegheny, Boyce, North, pediatric dosage questions, the blueprints for all 4 semesters. You can look at all that stuff in the main category folder because it's applicable to all students. All right. So I'm going to pull up another example question for the parenteral medications, the SCIM routes. So while I'm doing that, if you have a question about a particular topic from the blueprint or something else that you want to see reviewed, just message me or just unmute and let me know, and we can certainly go through that. I just chose the wrong one when I did this, so initially. Let's try this example. Okay. All right, so this question, don't worry about the numbers here. And then I already have this indicated, so let's just look at this here. So it says that you have your provider has prescribed this medication, furosemide, 30 milligrams IV every 2 hours for your client. How many milliliters will you give? So this is this is still considered an injectable. We're still going to solve this the same way as if it were subcutaneous or intramuscular. We're looking at the label to tell us what to do. So what I'm going to do is then I'm going to say, okay, well, my order is 30 milligrams. My available is, it says 20 milligrams and 2 milliliters, but then they simplify it and say 10 milligrams per milliliter. So this is what we actually want to use. So 10 milligrams, which is just 20 over 2. And so for this particular example, your answer would just be 3 milliliters. That's not a decimal, just so you know. That's just, oh, that was my pen was in there. Let me grab another example question because I think there's a couple better ones. I have some better ones. Now, if you are looking for more like practice test questions, you can go into the Allegheny 110 folder because I've done a lot of work with those classes. And so I have a couple of more examples with them. But if you feel like you want to use something different, that's perfectly fine as well. Just make sure you're studying the stuff as best you can. All right, here's another injectable type question. We'll get rid of the number here. All right, so let me get rid of some number or some things here. I'm going to change the numbers on this as well. Okay. And let's just make this, just make it 65. And to make it more relevant to you guys, because sometimes it won't tell you how much to administer. So this is an example of a Tubex. It's an injectable. We know it's injectable because it tells us intramuscular. It also tells us that this is an injection. So we know all these things based off of doing that. And it also tells us we can use this for IM, intramuscular, or subcutaneous. So if this had said mepridine subcutaneous stat, then the directions would still be applicable. If it's for IV, you would need to look at the other instructions. Okay. So it says we are ordered 65 milligrams. Intramuscular stat means right now. And then what a Tubex is a pre-filled syringe. So if you didn't know that already, that's what a Tubex is. And so what they're asking you to do is first calculate how much you're going to give per dose. Remember, if it's intramuscular, that's your tell that it's milliliters. And then you're just going to mark the Tubex. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our order over our available times my quantity. I'm going to plug that into my calculator. And I'm going to get an answer of 1.3 milliliters. Then on my Tubex, so this could be for a Tubex, this could be for a syringe if it's an injectable. We want to make sure we're marking our things correctly. So we can see where the 1 milliliter mark is. The next thing is, are each of these tick marks, are they 0.1 or are they 0.2? Because that sometimes you're going to see that differentiated. So what we're going to do is we're just going to count. So this is 1 milliliter. This would be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 is the same thing as 1.5. So our answer was 1.3. So 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. We will want to put a mark indicating that this is our, the mark that we're going to be withdrawing from. Sometimes it'll ask you to shade it. So you can shade that if you need to as well. So all right. So as kind of like an overall recap, you have a 25 question test. You're going to have an hour to complete it. They're going to give you a calculator. They're going to give you scratch paper. You need to score 92% or better, which means you can only miss 2 questions and pass. If you miss 3, you're going to have to remediate and take the retake. You get 2 attempts to get the 92% or better. The first 5 questions is going to be a lot of conversions, typically converting metric and household units. So remember, you have to know these metric to household conversions or household to metric conversions because they're not going to be given to you. So you need to know how to go from pounds to kilograms. You need to know how to go from milliliters to ounces, ounces to milliliters, teaspoons and tablespoons to milliliters. You need to know how to do those. And then obviously cups, pints, and quarts. You also need to know your metric conversions. So it does say converting pounds to kilograms under the metric conversions. Technically, that's a imperial to metric conversion, but you need to know that 1 gram is 1,000 milligrams, 1 milligram is 1,000 micrograms, a liter is 1,000 milliliters, so on and so forth. So you need to know those because they will not be given to you. So I didn't give any sample questions on household and metric other than at the very end of everything, kind of like the final page, I threw in a couple questions that you might see here. So that's what those were examples of the first 8 questions you might see, converting micrograms, milligrams, so on and so forth. As a reminder, for this question right here, where the answer is 1.275 milligrams, notice I did not round that answer. You don't round when you go from metric to metric. When it's just a very standard answer. You do round when you go from household to metric or metric to household. So if I'm going from pounds to kilograms, most likely you're going to need to round to the nearest tenth. And then obviously when you're dealing with your medications, you just can't administer, 1.275 milliliters. That's why you have to round when we're talking about actual medications. Then you'll have some fluid intake calculations. I've seen it. I think you'll have 2 of these fluid intake calculations where they'll give you a selection of foods for lunch or a meal, and then you have to go through and convert. Typically it's ounces, cups, pints, quarts to milliliters, add them all up, and then get a total for the milliliters. The thing to keep in mind is there might be some things that might trick you, like if they say Jello, like gelatin dessert, versus custard versus pudding. Those things, I haven't differentiated those because I'm not 100% certain on those, but nobody seems to have been asking that question. So I'm hoping that you know how to calculate the milliliters for like ice chips, you know, milk versus pudding versus ice cream. You have a variety of things there. Oral-based medications, I think most students are pretty good with because you've done this typically in your we'll just call it your civilian life, your non-nursing life. You've probably taken, you know, 2 Tylenol or have administered. You've kind of followed the directions. This is very similar. Like in this example, Xanax 0.5 milligram by mouth, BID. And then the question might be to calculate, you know, how much medication will the patient receive in 1 dose. If it's 0.5 milligram and they're 1/4 milligram each, 2/4 milligrams equal 0.5 milligram. And so, or you can just write it out. Here I wrote out both the dimensional analysis and the ordered over half versions. We get to the same answer. We just went over the parenteral medications. So I think you're pretty good on that. Like I said, the biggest difference between parenteral medications and then like the ones that are tablets and capsules, or just instead of tablets and capsules, you're looking for milliliters, and you might need a marker syringe. We discussed reconstitution. So reconstitution is just a subset of parenteral medications. The label looks different. And then I think, oh yeah, and then the last couple questions are on, you know, marking a syringe, reading a sliding scale, and that's usually pretty straightforward. Usually students will miss this because they won't pay attention to the number and the range and where that falls, and you answer it too quickly. Just look at the sliding scale. 365 is between 351 and 400. Your answer is 10 units. 10 units is your answer. You don't need to overthink that question, but I think that's the main reason why that type of question gets missed. So, all right. Yeah, that's pretty much your test in a nutshell. The biggest thing is just practicing. I have in previous semesters, because I had that extra week, I did go through like a whole practice set. So you should be able to find it if you look on my YouTube channel. There is a video that has like a you know, I think it says like Boyce 110 practice test walkthrough, I think is what I called it. So you can go through and watch that and see, try and follow along with me. I do believe that the 110 set or practice test is either on there. If it's not on there, then it's probably because I'm not allowed to give you the paper version of it, but you can at least watch it, take some notes, see if you can answer it. I would say before I answer it, pause it, see if you can answer it, and then, you know, go on to the next question. So all right. Well, if there are no questions, that's all I really have for you guys today. As always, if you do have questions between now and your test next week, just reach out to me. If you do want me to hold another review session next week, again, reach out to me or let Miss Petro know so I can plan for that. And then I can let you know the time that we can do that. So go ahead, Jasmine.
Do we have access to this review?
Yeah, it's on the YouTube channel. Oh, you're talking about the questions I put together?
Hello?
Are you talking about the questions I put together?
Oh, I'm sorry. The computer like did something weird. So
Okay.
this review that you have up in front of us right now, do we have access to that on Blackboard?
Yes, it's not on Blackboard. It's in the OneDrive folder. So you should have a link to the OneDrive folder where I share all these things, plus the YouTube link to the YouTube channel as well.
Okay.
So yes. Now I will say it's not a full and complete review. It's just a handful of questions as examples. That's why I was saying on the YouTube, there's a YouTube video that I did for Boyce 110. I think it was last or maybe in the spring or the fall or in the spring, that I did do a full walkthrough of a practice test that I may not be able to share, which is why but I did record me going through it, and you can just pause it, answer the question, and make sure you're getting the same answer I'm getting.
Got it. Oh, one more question. Will there be any dosage by weight questions on that?
The only weight questions you're going to have that I'm aware of is converting pounds to kilograms.
That's what I like to hear. Thanks.
Yeah. You'll see the weight-based calculations probably next semester. And honestly, if you can convert pounds to kilograms, then you're just multiplying by whatever milligrams per kilogram. It's not difficult. It's just sometimes if you don't know what the question's asking, that's what makes it hard. And then once you see it, then you're like, oh, I just need to convert pounds to kilograms, and then I answer the question. It's not a big deal. So, but yeah, you don't need to worry about weight-based calculations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to me between now and next week. If I don't hear from you, I wish you luck. I hope you do well and you crush this test so you don't have to remediate with me or the other tutors, because I know that's one less thing that you want to have to worry about. And then again, if you want to meet, because I think you don't have clinicals next week, so you have a little bit more maybe free time. If that's what you get, more just like study time, just let me know. And like I said, I'll make it work out. I'll try and connect with you guys either on Tuesday or Thursday and see what we can do. So. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording.